Welcome, welcome. I am Dr. Patrice Berry, licensed psychologist, and today we are going to be talking about the Taylor Schabusiness NGRI, not guilty by reason of insanity. I'm going to cover the morning part. I watched um, Emily D. Baker. I watched her coverage of this earlier today, and there were a few things that I wanted to add from a psychological perspective. So I am a licensed psychologist, and let's hop right in. So I wanted to start with her dad's testimony. They were going to have a forensic, or I don't even think it was forensic, they were going to have a pharmacist, I think, or pharmacologist that was going to testify. That individual, the defense ended up dropping that witness because the judge expressed some concerns about what that individual was and was not going to be able to say. So I wanted to start out first with her dad's testimony. They did not clarify. So the dad ended up, he was in, it seemed like he was in like a prison. It seems like dad is in custody for some reason. They did not clarify that at all. And so let me go on ahead and make this portion bigger, and let's go on ahead and start this section.
How the um, how the death of Taylor's mother took a toll on her or impacted her. Can you give me a little bit of commentary on that?
Well, they were pretty young. I mean,
And I just want to give a little background. So, Taylor's mother, I think she was about 11 years old when her mother passed of an illness in the home. And so the dad is going to talk about that a little bit.
obviously, her mom's not around anymore, and Marla was ill, so just I guess they kind of knew what was going on, but it was unexpected. We watched the movie the night before and fell asleep, and I woke up and my wife was already cold, already passed.
You found her?
She's laying next to me.
Okay. And what about the kids? What about Taylor? Did she see her mom in that state?
They did not see. No, I did not allow that.
Okay. But were the kids in the house?
They were upstairs in their bedrooms.
Okay. After that occurred, did you see any changes in Taylor's behavior, first of all?
She's a little rambunctious. Nothing. I mean, she played volleyball. She had a good amount of friends she hung out with. She was a normal kid.
Did things change at all for her?
I wouldn't say too much. She got in trouble a little bit at school, but I don't know, something with a band instrument.
What happened with that?
She just took somebody's band instrument.
And they really didn't go into this too much. The defense, this was their first person that they called. They are calling Taylor's dad to just talk about her mental state and any things that he had observed. Later on, they end up asking him some questions about whether he had reviewed any of her medical records. And then also, he gets a little feisty about the boyfriend at the end. But I want to make sure that I save time for the doctor that the defense called. So really, Dad, I don't know if he helped the defense's side because the defense is trying to show that she has a long-standing history of mental health diagnoses that range from bipolar disorder. I forget if I want to say like ADHD might have been mentioned, but then this next specialist. Oh, if you have already seen portions of this, her testimony, to me, Dr. Lewis was a lot more unprofessional than this particular person. So Dr. Lewis's testimony, in my opinion, was just very odd. This one still came off a little strange, and I think it's interesting that this doctor that she did not do any tests. She is basing her clinical opinion based off nothing but her 2-hour interview of her, and that she attempted to interview her one day, and then she ended up not, because I think Taylor refused and wouldn't speak to her or something. And then when she actually did interview her, the attorney was present that particular day. So I'm going to speed ahead and let's see if this is the part. But yeah.
From the date, if it's known, of inpatient.
Okay. So this is the portion where the doctor pretty much just reads a lot of Taylor's medical history and her history of hospitalizations. And she's pretty much like, she's just reading it.
Quote, psychosis and impulse control. But she was usually non-compliant. Then as far as I know, the antipsychotic olanzapine is currently her medication prescribed at the jail, but she has typically been non-compliant with taking it. And that's it for that exhibit.
Did you generate a report on this particular case?
Yes.
The judge's facial expressions have just like this testimony went on and on for a while. The cross was really good. So I am going to make sure to save time for the cross examination because to me, she got a little feisty with the prosecuting attorney during that portion.
Trouble, difficulty with paying attention and concentrating. My impression of her at that 2-hour interview was she was psychotic. She had visual, auditory, hearing, visual hallucination.
And she should be saying, in my opinion, she should be saying she appeared to have. She reported, it appeared as though she was responding to external stimuli. That would have been the type of language that I would use because this particular doctor did not give, and so she's a forensic psychologist. She did not do any testing to rule out, was she motivated to malinger? Was she lying or feigning symptoms that she didn't have? And only the individual, so you'll never know for sure, but there are psychological tests that can be administered that can get to those types of questions. And I believe there were other experts, including experts provided by the defense, that gave those types of tests and that did find some malingering, and so possible malingering, but yeah.
Auditory hallucinations. She was delusional. She was paranoid. She answered some of my questions. My impression of her was that she was really trying to answer questions, and she was verbal. This time she spoke with me. She was verbal, but my impression was that she was really trying to answer my questions. But her thinking was very, what we call disorganized, very delusional. She was actively hallucinating, hearing things, a train, a loud train whistle, that she is screaming.
And the only reason why I bring up the possibility of malingering is because similar things came up with Letitia Stout's her different assessments and everything. And I think that jury found her to not be credible because she didn't do any additional tests. And so in these situations, I do think that there should be some type of brain scans, or there should be like some testing. There typically is something you can do, just a clinical interview. It's just not going to hold as much weight typically if you don't do some type of testing. The other side is always going to take issue with the fact that there wasn't testing, that this is solely based on observation and off what the client is reporting.
Which she told me she hears in the courtroom too. As the 2 hours went on, she became so distracted and very, afraid. You could see it on her face, fear, because of the delusions she was experiencing right then.
And once again, I would just want to know, because of, like, is that what she said, or how is she coming to these conclusions? To me, there wasn't a clear explanation of how she's coming to these things. And she also has to make sure that she's talking about her mental state at the time of the offense, at the time that because she's been found guilty of the crime at that time. What was her mental condition? What was her mental state? And what was the potential role of methamphetamines at that time? Because so I saw Emily D. Baker and some other lawyers have covered this case, talking about that voluntary drug substance use, that can't go with an NGRI defense, that there has to be that long-standing mental health condition, and you have to somehow rule out that it wasn't because of this. Let me go ahead and keep going.
She got more and more scared about what she thought she saw, a train, and of this louder whistle. So after 2 hours, that was it. She was so, in my...
It was a really good question, so I want to answer this question. Did she attempt testing? And so, no, she at no point. So I think Taylor has done 5 assessments. And so I believe she reviewed all of those records, but she did not even, I don't think she even brought any assessments with her. So Dr. Lewis is a psychiatrist. This doctor is a forensic psychologist. And so, psychologist, I'm a clinical psychologist. So, I'm trained to do psychological testing. And we are going to get to when she rolls her eyes about the MMPI. Like, that was just, oh my gosh. And yes, I was all up in Emily D. Baker's stream earlier. I will check out her afternoon coverage. I had this break in my day. And so, I wanted to be able to cover this with you all. So, this is going to be part 1. And I'm likely going to record part 2 either tonight, covering the rest of it, or possibly tomorrow, but we will see. And Christina, I'm sorry if she reminds you, because I'm guessing, I'm hoping, or if that's a good thing, then, but I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing. If she reminds someone of, like, the defense, they found an expert that was willing to say that she should be found not guilty by reason of insanity. And I don't know if she is, I don't know if these are her true emotional expressions. I felt like Letitia went in, I don't know, like she has truly seemed out of it for most of the time. Longstanding methamphetamine use, it can impact your brain. So I'm not saying that she wasn't experiencing something at the time, but it does seem like she understood based on what I've seen. It does seem like she understood that that somebody was going to die, and that this was very problematic. Oh, good, it's a good thing. Okay, so good. So lovable and grandmotherly. Okay, because to me she comes off kind of condescending a little. Like, I don't know, she comes off a little not, but that's just to me. So we'll keep going.
My impression was that she was so distressed. I didn't want to continue the interview. I felt I would be inflicting more harm on her if I continued the interview. So she gave me some information about her bipolar condition, her mental health history, family. Yeah, that was...
Dr. Litton, thank you. Do you have an opinion on whether or not Ms. Schabusiness's memory for remote or recent events was impaired when you met with her?
Yes.
Tell me about that a little bit.
Not only did I see that memory issues, impairment in the two.
Okay. So when we're talking about memory impairment, if she had given an intelligence test where she had tested her memory, or if she had done, I don't even know that she did oh my gosh, the one where it's not the interview, because there's like an informal, just mental status exam. I don't know that she even gave a mental status exam where you say some things at the beginning and the person has to remember them at the end. It does not sound, this just sounds like a very unstructured interview. And I also, because the lawyer was present, and Taylor had thrown a chair at her in one of the other interviews and had been non-compliant with her first 2 or 3 attempts. And this attorney was present for this interview. Wow, wow, wow.
2-hour interview, but I see it in her records too. She can sometimes remember remote events, like, pretty well, where she lived, approximate dates, the approximate time her mother died, and so the date when she got married, roughly. It's a little fuzzy, but yeah, better remote memory. But she often will, in the same interview.
Okay, I wanted to address another question because I'm probably going to speed through this part because to me, I don't know that she's really adding much to this section. And she's just, her opinion is that Taylor was not competent. That is pretty much what she's going to come to. So forensic psychologists, what they can do, they do therapy inside if they are stationed within a jail or within a mental health hospital. So I have friends that are forensic psychologists, and they work in hospitals to help restore people's competency. And they meet with them regularly, they do the assessments, and they also do the forensic assessments, likely not of their own patients. I don't know. I don't know everything about their work. Some forensic psychologists only do testing, especially the ones. So being a paid expert, that is a bit of a lucrative, like that's something that you're paid to do. And so some people do mostly paid assessments. I believe she also does assessments of people that are risk. It's like the SA risk that she does some of those types of assessments. But to me, you would always do some type of testing in these situations. So thank you for that question. Please let me know if y'all have more questions along the way. So the judge took a break in the middle. We're going to continue with this next portion.
Off the scale, 32 years. I've seen a lot of psychotic people, bipolar, psychotic, manic, and I just haven't seen very many like this. That is very exceptional, very exceptional.
Do you believe that she has a genuine mental disorder
Yes,
of a psychotic nature?
yes.
What is the nature?
The best, my best opinion is the bipolar 1, with sometimes with psychosis, sometimes not. But that after we got the Bellin records.
So this is where, because he asked her a very direct question. What is your diagnosis? Like that was a very direct question. And the answer could have been bipolar 1 with psychotic features. That could have been the answer. But then she starts bringing up schizophrenia and schizoaffective, but that's why you would do like a thorough assessment, because if she's found NGRI, they have to have a diagnosis that's connected to this. And so I'm guessing she's going with mostly, but I am confused.
From 2 inpatient admissions at age 12 and 14, or 14 and 16. Let me just double check. Yeah, 14 and 16. She was diagnosed at 14 with bipolar, depression, severe with psychosis. So that confirmed that's I was thinking about schizophrenia, and sometimes schizophrenia and bipolar are very hard to distinguish. Sometimes not, but sometimes really hard to tell bipolar from schizophrenia. And there's a kind of a combined one called schizoaffective disorder, and that's been applied.
So schizoaffective, but once again, she's not giving the diagnosis. So what schizoaffective disorder is it's somebody that presents with symptoms of schizophrenia and symptoms of a bipolar disorder, but they end up having both symptoms. They kind of overlap versus because typically with a bipolar disorder, when there's psychosis, it would be within a mood episode. And with schizophrenia, but there are some people that have, even outside of the mood symptoms, they still have symptoms of schizophrenia, and there's a diagnosis called schizoaffective. It can be kind of difficult to diagnose. It's often diagnosed within long-term treatment facilities. Somebody also asked a question that I wanted to highlight. I don't know why her dad is incarcerated. I might try to Google it during the next kind of. I don't know why he's incarcerated. Neither, so the defense and the prosecution, nobody brought that up, and I wonder if they agreed to that beforehand. The dad seemed to get a little feisty. I don't know if he didn't want to be there. To me, I didn't show that portion. He seemed to get a little feisty with them towards the end, and with some of the questions, and so we will keep going.
To her too, but I think based on this history we have from Belen when she was diagnosed with bipolar, and then again at Nicolay when she was 22 years old, also bipolar. Yeah, my opinion is based on my experience and training is bipolar 1. The more serious, there's bipolar 1, bipolar 2. But bipolar 1 can have psychosis, psychotic episodes. So that's my opinion.
Are your opinions to a reasonable degree of professional certainty or psychological certainty?
Yes.
Both, correct?
Yes.
You did prepare a report on all of these findings, correct?
Yes.
Could I approach your arm?
Okay, so that's basically it for. I want to fast forward to the cross-examination. Oh, so I don't know if you watched Whitney's story, but Whitney was on substances before she met Bobby. That was something that she did before. I've watched a few of her biopics, and it was really interesting just learning more about her life. And the biopics aren't going to be exactly what happened, but a lot of times people try to blame it on a particular person. I think, yeah, I'll hold. So often people that are at risk to use substances, they might struggle with coping. And often individuals with mental health diagnoses, they can be more likely to abuse substances. And so that is definitely a thing. And so let's get to the cross. Is this that section? Let's see.
Direct witnesses, but I reviewed the police reports, all their interviews. That's basically it. What she told other evaluators and what she told me very briefly. So that was it.
So it was when you say police reports, you're referring to like the paper report that a detective or officer wrote?
Right. There's the criminal complaint or information, which is a couple pages long, but then attached usually with it, are the basis for the criminal charges. And, with the police, I guess in this case, the police who went there, arrested her, their interviews with her.
So did you just review the criminal complaint or also all of the police reports?
All the police reports.
Okay. So then it sounds like you didn't review the recorded interview itself of Ms. Schabusiness.
Transcript, the recorded interview herself, and the at least an hour and a half, 2 hours of the video interview.
I'm sorry. Did you review the recorded interview of Ms. Schabusiness from February 23rd of 2022?
What I was given by the attorney was a transcript of their interviews. And so a transcript, written type.
But the transcript is going to have a very different feel than the actual video because you would get to see what her mental state was at that time. If I was doing this type of assessment, and I don't do forensic assessments, I would have wanted to see the actual video because she is giving an opinion about her time, her Taylor's mental state at the time of the offense, and she's only looking at the written thing. So
Okay.
The transcript.
Was it like the police report summarizing it?
If I remember right, it was a transcript of the, I don't know if they had a court reporter in there. I don't know how they do that.
But not the actual visual image itself. You didn't.
I only saw about an hour and a half, 2 hours of the visual.
she did see it. I'm confused.
Visual, whatever you call it, video in those conference rooms where the police detectives were interviewing Miss Schabusiness.
So you reviewed an hour and a half of that. Was that the February 23rd interview?
Yes, I believe so.
And so you didn't review the rest of the approximate 5.5 hours of that interview?
No, it didn't transmit to me by computer for some reason. So it was only roughly an hour and a half, 2 hours of what I did see.
And if she wasn't able, if for some reason the defense wasn't able to get her the full video electronically, if they could have put it on a disc, or there are other options to be able to get it to her securely. But okay, let's keep going.
I guess the defense didn't provide the whole interview for you?
They tried, but for whatever reason, I don't know, technology between the DAs or what, that's happened before, not uncommon.
Sure. Well, to be clear, we aren't providing you any information to review, right?
What? Pardon?
The state isn't providing you any information to review, right? You're getting that information from other people.
Well, I think it goes from you all to him.
Sure.
Yeah, right. And then to
Okay.
me. Yeah.
So then it also sounds like, Doctor, you haven't reviewed the February 28th interview of Ms. Schabusiness?
I read the police descriptions of it, and I thought I had a transcript. I think it was a summary, pretty decent summary of the February 28th. Similar, the summary, pretty decent, detailed of the February 23, the 2 interviews they did on that day.
But not, again, the actual visual image, the recorded interview itself.
Not from that one again. If it was sent to me, I couldn't see it.
And you mentioned that obviously one of your sources of information is from your meeting or meetings with.
I'm checking the comments. I agree that it seems odd to only go by what the transcripts are saying. I agree. So especially when there are other experts that are going to disagree, because if I'm an expert in this situation, I want to make sure that I am very thorough, because there are other other professionals within my field that have come to a different opinion from mine, and I want to show that I'm being extremely thorough, that I am coming across incredibly credible, that I am a Dr. Curry. That's what over in Emily D. Baker's, the chat was all just, where's Dr. Curry? We were all longing for the amazing testimony. And then also with Letitia Stout's trial, there were some other phenomenal attorneys that forensic psychologists that I thought did a really good job presenting that information. To me, I would think that you would review everything.
Ms. Schabusiness?
Yes.
All right. And the the February 7th, 2023 interview, that was the instance where Ms. Schabusiness threw a chair at you, right?
Yes.
And after she did that, you said she just sat down.
Yeah.
Right. And was calm after that point?
Very. And I looked at her, as I'm subject to doing, I used that time before the guards came in, maybe.
To me, I don't know if that would have been a psychosis thing, or just that I don't want to talk to you. Back up. I don't want to talk to you thing. I don't know if that, because there seems to be some self-control with that, of just throwing the chair and then that's it, and then waiting a few minutes for the guard to come. I don't know that I would have viewed that as a psychotic behavior. That's just me personally.
It took a while, 3 minutes or so, and it was weird, bizarre, whatever you want to call it, because she immediately, very calmly, came back, sat down across from me, and I looked at her physiological responses, just totally blank. And again, I've seen violent patients. I got attacked once, beat up at Mendota, got slapped. But I saw very many aggressions on the unit I was on at Mendota for the 14 most aggressive patients, males in the whole state. And we'd have between 3 to 7 aggressions. And usually after a person does something like that, they have a red face, angry, yelling, swearing, breathing heavily, nothing.
So, those prior instances.
I would also wonder how many females she's assessed as well. I would just wonder, like some of her conclusions, they're just as just another person who did not interview or have any interaction with Miss Schabusiness, I would have come to a different conclusion.
As you talked about, those were with people who were at Mendota, you said?
Yeah.
So those were people who were actually found to have a mental illness.
No, not all of them. We were the overflow unit. We mostly had our patients were from around the state, jails, prisons, Winnebago mental health. They were most of them had been found not guilty, legally insane. But we were the overflow unit for the admission unit for competency evaluation. So they were not all necessarily mentally ill, but most were with a psychotic illness.
And those were the people who you made a gesture, like a red face.
Yeah,
like
but
that after.
I've dealt with many aggressive.
I'm going to try to fast forward a little bit.
Discharge summary.
Yes.
And I guess the discharge summary, that's kind of like the exit interview, so to speak. Right?
Exactly.
All right. So you would recognize that if you were to see it?
Maybe.
I'm just going to keep going because I think at one point they start to argue about a particular diagnosis.
And actually, I glossed over 2 discharge diagnoses. One was the bipolar, right?
Yes.
Well, there was a second one, wasn't there?
Yes. Substance use disorder, i.e., in other words, THC, marijuana, and methamphetamine.
Thank you. You talked then about some of these hallucinations that are scattered throughout the records you reviewed, right?
Yes.
And some of those are things that the defendant is endorsing. Isn't that fair?
Yes.
And what does endorsing mean?
She's saying self-report. She's reporting them herself. She's describing some of them herself. Not a lot over her history. Are you talking about the hallucinations?
Just the concept of what endorsing means. And
Yeah,
just
just
something
saying
that's reported by a person.
Do you have a headache? And if you say yes, that you're endorsing the headache.
Thank you.
The prosecution, I'm glad that he went on this line of questioning because, yeah, we're gonna keep going because it's pointing out the fact that these are just things that she's reporting and that an actual assessment of her is going to possibly provide a less biased perspective, that a person can not be honest about their symptoms. Like that is something that can happen. For me personally, I always want to think like I come from a lens, and that's why I don't do forensic because forensic is very much they're looking for, are you telling the truth? And there are major consequences based on the decisions that the psychologist comes to. But yeah.
And actually, while we're still on the topic of the bipolar diagnosis at Nicolay Psychiatric, you mentioned that you reviewed a report.
And somebody asked, is that a good way to describe endorsing? Yeah. And so endorsing is just what the client reports. That's, yeah.
Authored by Dr. Lucetta, is that right?
Yes.
And Dr. Lucetta was a expert retained by the defense earlier in the case.
Yes.
And she prepared a report that you reviewed.
Yes.
And part of that report, Dr. Lucetta spoke with Ms. Schabusiness.
Yes.
And do you recall a portion where they were discussing that bipolar diagnosis?
I don't remember that exactly.
Would it
I'd have
assist
to look at it.
Would it assist to review
Sure.
Dr. Lucetta's report?
The defense is trying to make a point. They're going to give you the report. They're about to make a point. No, sorry, not defense, prosecution.
Okay, I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 11. Does that appear to be consistent with Dr. Lucetta's report?
I believe so.
Can you review that report?
Yes.
Doctor, if you could turn to page 3 of that report. In the second paragraph, I guess it's the first full paragraph.
And so, great question in the chat. Yes, I do believe that the bipolar diagnosis, I think that goes back. So, but the DSM-5 has changed the way bipolar disorder is diagnosed in children and teens. I'd be interested to see if she was displaying mania at that time. So they added a new diagnosis in the DSM-5, disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. I forget, so I don't know exactly how old or which DSM we were on at that time. But I do believe that it was either when she was 16 or 14 or 16, something like that. But her records have been a little inconsistent. And even though a person has a bipolar diagnosis, that does not mean that they're going to be found not guilty by reason of insanity. And there are lots of people that have tried to bring their mental health into, because I think, what was his name? The guy, was it that another Wisconsin one? The guy had an argument with his girlfriend and then drove his car. Y'all know who I'm talking about. He represented himself. It was a big mess. I'm horrible with names, but his case, he tried to bring a bipolar diagnosis in, and he was just trying to do not guilty, not guilty by reason of, because I think he was just trying to say I didn't do it at all. His defense was all over the place. But just because someone has a bipolar diagnosis, and I am here, so I do this type of presenting and all of this to talk about the fact that people with mental health diagnoses are more likely to be victims of crimes than to actually commit crimes. Now, in jails, there are lots of people that have ADHD, that might have mental health diagnoses, but that does not mean that they're not responsible for whatever actions they did at the time of their defense, at the time of everything. And just because something is strange and odd, yes, Daryl Brooks, thank you. No, yes, well, maybe, yes. Thank you for that, Daryl Brooks. But, and just because somebody does have a diagnosis, that does not mean that they're not responsible. So let's keep going. Excuse me.
Sort of the last sentence of that, and it says, quote, she, and that refers to Ms. Schabusiness, questioned the bipolar diagnosis, hypothesizing that her symptoms were attributable to methamphetamine abuse, explaining that prior to admission, she had been administering the drug intravenously up to 9 times per day for 5 to 8 months prior to.
This is really good. This part's really good. I've been talking a lot. This part is really good.
Her admission. Did I read that right?
Yes.
And that's referencing the Nicolay records that we just talked about, right?
Yes.
And that's where the bipolar diagnosis came from.
Just a second here. She seems to be, at the right beginning, it says Ms. Schabusiness reported that she was previously admitted, blah, 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 blah. And it seems like that's what she's telling to Dr. Lucetta. But then at the point where that last sentence, she questioned the bipolar. That's, I had difficulty. I remember reading this, and I couldn't quite figure it out. I think you're right that when she's questioning, she questioned the bipolar diagnosis, attributing it maybe to methamphetamine abuse. I think Dr. Lucetta is taking that Ms. Schabusiness, that's what she told Nicolay, the psychiatric stuff there, I think.
That your interpretation is that sentence refers to what Ms. Schabusiness told Nicolay?
Well, Miss Schabusiness told Dr. Lucetta at the beginning of the paragraph that she was admitted to Nicolay. Okay, so that's her self-report. She was vague about why admitted, bipolar. She was diagnosed with bipolar. She was discharged. She discontinued.
And if she had a question about anything that was in this report, because this opinion, like, because if she's not sure what the person was saying, she likely could have gotten a release to be able to talk to this individual to get clarification on what was meant by this. And so I wonder, I don't know who the prosecution is called.
Continue the medication. She doesn't like to take medication. She questioned the bipolar diagnosis. So I'm not sure if that reflects when she was at Nicolay or what she's telling Dr. Lucetta. I'll go, and you think it was Dr. Lucetta, so that's okay, because she's done that. Sometimes she will say, this is Miss Schabusiness, yeah, I've been diagnosed with bipolar. Other times she will say, I don't think I've got it. I don't like taking medications. It varies. It does vary. So but let's just agree that this is what she's telling Dr. Lucetta, but it's a little hazy there.
And I guess the point, doctor, in any event, the sentence I read, those were the statements of Ms. Schabusiness regarding the bipolar diagnosis.
Right, regardless if she's telling Dr. Lucetta or the treaters at Nicolay. She questioned it. Not unusual.
Sure.
And once again, that's why you would do testing to figure out more. You just would. So great question. Did Dr. Lucetta do an in-depth direct assessment? So I do believe, I haven't seen Dr. Lucetta's report. So I don't know if that was entered as part of the evidence. I don't know if Dr. Lucetta is going to be testifying if the prosecution has called that particular doctor. So we will keep going.
I then, doctor, would like to talk a little bit more about bipolar 1. What is the diagnostic criteria for bipolar 1?
Ugh. When a person has, by definition, they have to.
This is just my opinion. The doing the because she probably didn't like that particular question. Most people don't have the particular criteria saved in their brain, but you would try to manage that reaction. But because you're trying to look credible in front of the jury. But okay.
We've had at least one what's called a manic episode, which is extremely elevated mood, and it can be with psychosis, thought disorder, or not, but they have to have at least one prior or current manic episode. By two things. It's either you go from depression, really bad depression with bipolar 1, super duper suicidal type, real depression. And then they have to have it in their history, at least one of these real super duper elevated
I'm going to
moods.
fast forward again.
That can be used to help determine if somebody is accurately providing you information, right?
Yes.
One of those is the MMPI.
Yes.
And those, have you used those before?
Oh, yeah.
And they're helpful for you to.
Did you see that face again? Oh yeah. So I don't know. So I don't love the MMPI. I personally give the PAI, the Personality Assessment Inventory. It has a lower reading level, and it also has less questions. And the MMPI is all true and false. And the PAI, it gives false, sometimes true, mostly true, very true. And so I found that to be more helpful. But the facial expressions, they're getting to me a little, and it's reminding me a little of some of the facial expressions that Dr. Spiegel. I was not able to cover that one live. I wish I had known about StreamYard and doing all this stuff back then, because I definitely would have streamed that one, but this part gets interesting.
Know if a patient is providing you accurate information.
But
I'm sorry.
yes, but you have to take that. It's one part of the clinical evaluation, but you got to evaluate it with other information to decide if it's an accurate test result.
Sure. But you need that information to then know if it's accurate, right?
You need what information?
You need to perform the test.
You don't have to perform. I don't have to perform fancy 500, 300. I don't have to do that. That's not a requirement. Psychiatrists don't.
So I was like, when I was watching this earlier and I saw this part, I was like, what? Like who? What? That reaction got me, because it was an understandable question, because she didn't do psychological testing. And so, like, you have to have a justification for how can you come to this opinion to debunk other people that have given these psychological tests. How can you justify your opinion? And she seems offended that he's asking her why she didn't do this. And I'm gonna keep going because
Don't do psychological testing. So sometimes I might do it, but I've done many evaluations without that when I have enough other information that you're not required. There's nothing that says you're a psychologist, you got to do MMPI. No, you don't have to do that. But I've done it many times.
And Doctor, I wasn't suggesting that. What I was suggesting is you mentioned that you need to take that test into account and see if it's accurate, essentially, right?
If you've done the test,
Yes.
sure. Or if somebody else, like in this case, it had been done by all these other people. So I consider that information, and that they found that, yes, she had, the other thing, she had over-presented. We call it the test can detect when you're over-presenting a symptom, like, oh my God, I really got a bad headache, really super,
So most of those tests, the MMPI, PAI, they have what's called validity measures, and it tests for both over-reporting and then also under-reporting of symptoms. And in forensic settings, it's common to both get under-reporting and over-reporting. But if somebody endorsed certain things, I would ask them follow-up questions. I would try to get an idea of why they came to the answers that they came to, and try to get a better understanding of what was going on. But okay, we'll just keep going.
like that, you over-present it. It basically, again, it could be faking, but it's just an exaggeration. That's another term we use.
Sure. So, but in your report, again, Exhibit 6, I think you quote, psychological testing by other evaluators found signs of possible malingering or intentional faking of mental disorder symptoms. Is that a fair summary of what you wrote in your report?
Yes.
All right. And at the end of your report, it says, quote, testing can reveal attempts to fake a mental disorder, end quote. Did I quote that accurately? It's on page 9 of your report, Doctor. Last sentence.
Right. Yes.
And the lawyer is being incredibly professional, because I think he's probably very frustrated. I'm sure he's a little frustrated, but let's keep going.
And so what attempts did you make to use some of those tests to determine if Ms. Schabusiness was faking?
Yeah, good question. I looked at the other psychologist's test results, plus another evaluator done concerning her baby, Child Protective Services. I think he did testing too. So
Why is she bringing this up? Why is she bringing up CPS? Like, I didn't know the CPS had been involved with the case, and the defense attorney is doing a phenomenal job managing his reactions to this situation, because I'm sure he didn't want her to potentially bring that up. But what?
I look at those results. Yes, they showed exactly what you're saying, but then I take that in the context of the rest of the evaluation and my experience and training.
So, doctor, you did not conduct any of those tests with Ms. Schabusiness on June 19th.
Yes. Or is that no? Which way do I answer that
Sure.
one? I did not conduct any of those tests, right, on whenever I did.
Even though
Yeah.
those tests can be helpful to determine if a patient is providing you accurate information.
Yes.
And you didn't utilize any of those tests in this case.
No.
That's an answered objection.
So the funny thing is the state is actually the one that typically pays, because if the defense, if unless there's a private defense attorney and the individual, so like if this is a public defender, if this is a public case, then the state is actually the one that pays for the defense experts as well. They have hearings on it and they decide, like, because they agree to the amount. So typically if it's a state funded one, the state will have like a maximum amount that they pay. But yeah, the state. So if this is a public defender, the state actually pays for the testimony. But
Thank you, doctor. I have nothing further.
It's going to be a bit, Your Honor. Do you want to take a break or should
all right. So I wanted to share that part. I will come back. I will. I think I want to come back tonight. So probably about 9 p.m. Eastern, I will post a link. I'll go ahead and schedule that now. I will come back live later tonight to cover the other experts and the second portion. This case is just wow. And I think they're going to be finished by tomorrow. And so I don't know if the defense has more experts that are coming. I don't know if this is their only expert. I've been in sessions. And so I don't know what all has happened, because they're currently on. If you follow Emily D. Baker, I believe she's live. You can head over to her coverage. I do plan to talk, because I got a really good question talking about breaking down methamphetamine use and bipolar disorder. And so I will cover that during part 2. So we'll be able to go into that a little bit more. Yes, EDB is currently live. I am a law nerd. I also follow The Lawyer You Know, and Natalie, and Runkle. And so I love LawTube, and I like giving the psychological perspective. If you all have questions or have things that you would like for me to cover in part 2, please let me know. Thank you all so much for joining. I hope y'all enjoy the rest of your day.